On behalf of Herbalife Nutrition, Wipro, Daily Hunt, One India, I'd like to welcome you to this special session today. Friends, the dialogue around Eat Right India has been rightly aligned to the National Health Policy 2017, which was proposed 4 years back. This policy envisaged healthcare and well-being for all at all ages through a preventive, proactive, and promotive healthcare orientation in all development policies, and to provide universal access to good quality healthcare services without anyone having to face hardships as a consequence. Accordingly, one of the most important things that we can do for our health every day is, of course, to eat wisely. Today we have with us Julian Caccioli, Vice President, Corporate Affairs, EMEA and India in Herbalife Nutrition. As Vice President, Corporate Affairs, EMEA and India, Caccioli is tasked with sharing the Herbalife Nutrition story and enhancing its reputation amongst key stakeholders and opinion makers across more than 50 markets through corporate communications, government relations and public affairs, employee engagement and ESG. Prior to his current role, Caccioli was Vice President, Worldwide Corporate Communications for Herbalife Nutrition based in Los Angeles, California, where he oversaw media relations, social media and employee engagement. And he took this global role, having spent the previous 4 years as Vice President, Corporate Communications for Herbalife's EMEA region. He has more than 25 years of international corporate affairs experience, defining and executing high-profile reputation strategies across a broad spectrum of industry sectors. Previous to Herbalife Nutrition, he's held a number of senior regional and global communications roles for Travelport, the world's largest network of travel brands, content and services. And during his tenure, he was communications lead on a number of successful acquisitions as that led to successful acquisitions and subsequent integration, as well as playing a key role in repositioning the brand. He's also held senior communications and marketing positions with companies as diverse as food retailer Pret, A-Manager, IT Group, Higam System Service, IT hardware manufacturer, and OKI Europe Group. Thank you so much, sir. It's always a privilege to speak to you, an honor, in fact. And as we see, India has clearly made progress towards improving nutrition, but the road ahead is still long. My first question to you is, undernutrition contributes to around 45% of death in children under mostly 5 years, mostly in low and middle income countries. And the path to zero hunger includes empowering women. So you have to potentially tap women's potential and empower them with education, resources, and freedom. All of this and action is crucial to bringing hunger to an end. Tell us, sir, please tell us about your initiative.
So, namaste, and thank you, Dr. Kumar Nidhi, for your very kind welcome. I always feel quite old when you list all of my my past work. Look, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor, as you say, to be speaking today. And I want to start really by congratulating FSSAI and the whole team really behind the Eat Right program. I think it's a vital initiative, and it really will have far-reaching benefits for the whole of India going into the future. And having been part of the initial pilot last year, it's so exciting to see this initiative expand across India. I just learned it's going to be running in 10 states, 12 cities, and over 40 campuses. And that's going to be a lot of people that are going to hear a lot of great information and knowledge about nutrition and eating right of all generations. So Herbalife Nutrition is certainly committed to doing all we can to keep supporting the FSSI through this initiative. Now, the question you raise is a great question, Nidhi, because all the research you look at, all the organizations from the United Nations down, rates of hunger, food insecurity, malnutrition are rising across the world. And these are driven by complex factors which vary from community to community and from country to country. But solutions to these mounting challenges are critical, and there are some consistent approaches that can be taken, including the need to promote access to sustainable healthy diets, but also education about healthy foods and lifestyle. And broader than that, I think when we look at a government level, is how do we adapt global food systems to meet the needs of the people of the world? And I think, as you said, as part of your question, supporting young children and empowering women in all of these areas is going to be key to success. Now, we've been delivering and developing world-class nutrition products and solutions through our independent distributors and associates for over 40 years. And we've supported millions of customers and communities around the world, and they're in India, with education, coaching, and access to improve nutrition. Now, we've seen the power of good nutrition, and it is a power in transforming the communities in which we've worked. And this impact was really the driving force behind our corporate Nutrition for Zero Hunger initiative. And it's through this global responsibility program that we're committed to ending global hunger, or doing our part to end global hunger. And we're doing that by working alongside leading non-profit partners to really tackle those mounting challenges of hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. And we're partnering with organizations such as Save the Children and SOS Children Villages. In fact, they're in India, to support millions of women and children worldwide and to help them address the real challenge of not having enough or the right nutrition. Now, we're doing that through providing direct interventions, whether that's providing nutritious meals and food and access to these things for women and children to support healthy growth and development, whether it's donating nutrient-rich Herbalife nutrition products. In fact, our Herbalife employees and our associates there in India recently donated thousands and thousands of kilograms of food and dry rations to food banks and communities right the way across India as part of our Nutrition for Zero Hunger program. But the Nutrition for Zero Hunger is one part of that strategy. And I think you have to look at those different elements to support the women and support the children in these communities. We're working, for example, with Sambhav Foundation to support women and children's development through things such as hygiene and nutrition education. We support a program of mobile science labs, which is taking STEM education to young girls in communities and villages and areas of India where they might otherwise not have access to that kind of education. And we're also working with grassroots and niche sports organizations such as Bharat, Special Olympics Bharat, and really helping fill each of those elements, whether it's nutrition, whether it's healthy living, whether it's hygiene. All of these, I think, will help address that very real problem which you identified of malnutrition around the world.
Absolutely. And as you rightly said, a big shout out to FSSAI for their endeavors in this direction.
Absolutely.
Let me now ask you, sir, now that immunity is the buzzword, especially in these pandemic times, how can Herbalife ensure that we build immunity to ensure further well-being?
I think that, immunity, following general good health guidelines, whether that's balanced diet, whether that's regular exercise, whether that's just good personal hygiene, these are all your first line of defense when it comes to naturally keeping your immune system strong and healthy. And there is a clear connection between the immune system and good nutrition. So I think it's critical for people to consume a balanced diet with the right vitamins, minerals, and macronutrients that are needed, whilst at the same time maintaining that healthy lifestyle, that exercise, that hydration, that good sleep. All of these things come together to support a nutrition, to support your immunity system. Now, I think if you're going to single out some areas of focus, I think there are four I think 4 key nutrients you would focus on, which will really help support your immune system. Protein, that big macronutrient, I think is the building block, and it allows your body to manufacture the antibodies to defend itself. We have to make sure that we have sufficient levels of protein in our diet. We have to eat more healthy protein, fish, poultry, lean meats, and of course, plant proteins, which are becoming much, much more recognized as an alternative to meat. Soy is a very good example, and many of our products are our flagship Formula One product, for example, our protein shake, is based on soy protein. And we've been really a pioneer in the use of plant proteins right the way through from our inception back in 1980, right the way through to today. I think the second is vitamins and phytonutrients, and these are very important. And you find these in vegetables and fruits. And there's a book out which is What Color is Your Diet? And people don't often realize that the different colors you get on your plate all bring you different phytonutrients and different things which help you with your immune system. So that's an important part of your diet. And if you can't get them through your food, obviously multivitamins is a way to supplement that. The third is the digestive system. And again, this is an area which we're learning so much more about, the microbiome, the connection between good health and gut health. And probiotics, prebiotics are an important part of that whole nutrition piece. And I think the final is the omega-3, those kind of healthy fatty acids, which many of us get through seeds, nuts, and oily fish. And of course, there are supplements. Herbalife line is a good example where you can ensure you reach your levels of healthy fats. But I think the message is there is no silver bullet. There is no easy answer to this. It's all about getting the right nutrition into your body, making sure you hydrate, making sure you exercise, and getting enough sleep for your body to repair each night.
And to add to that, as you said, and you rightly mentioned, a good gut health. That is something we really need to take care of.
Absolutely right.
Well, absolutely. So my next question would be that India is home to a third of the world's stunted children. There is significant opportunity for us to help our children reach their full potential, not only through direct feeding programs. What else can be done? What more can be done? What is the road ahead?
Yeah, stunting is such a terrible thing, and it's we understand it's caused by undernutrition, and it is so serious, but it is reversible. But if you leave it unchecked, it can have a huge impact on individuals to national situations. Stunting on that individual level impedes an individual's cognitive development, their physical development, and is proven to lower their educational attainment. And all of this nationally can have a long-term impact on countries, as studies have shown that stunting is really an impediment to national productivity and economic growth. So it's really, really important that we address this at a national and an individual level. And as you say, it is a major issue in India, and globally, depending on which research you look at, over 150 million children under the age of 5 are suffering from stunting in 2020 alone. So I think there are a number of different areas we can look at, and it is a multi-sectoral approach. But I think we all realize that first 1,000 days is key, right? That first point from conception right the way through to that 1,000 days is really where you make the biggest difference to addressing the issue of stunting. And it really will take a multi-agency approach, governments, NGOs, companies like Herbalife Nutrition, community organizations. All of us are going to have to come together to really address that. And there are many ways we're going to do this, whether that's making access to good nutrition available to the mothers during their pregnancy and to the newborn children in those early days. That is going to be vital. I think education is going to be important. Young mothers, young families need to understand the importance of nutrition, the importance of that first 1,000 days, And if we can help them understand how to make the right choices, when you put that alongside giving them access to those choices, I think you'll make a big difference. And I think as well, we're seeing in countries around the world where you can better support and better empower community organizations, community health workers, helping those young families, those young mothers, those children to really guide them through those initial months and years. I think that is all going to be vital. So all these elements need to come together, and certainly at Herbalife Nutrition, we're very close to announcing a partnership that we're very proud of in the coming months, where we will be addressing this on a global basis. So we recognise it's an important issue, and we are committed to helping support that. But it is going to be a very complex solution needed to help.
Another very complex problem is obesity, affecting 1 in 5 Europeans. Nutrition has become a major health concern across the European Union. We want to share with you and your insights. We would like you to share your insights and your views on Herbalife nutrition policies.
It's one of those contradictions that people look at Europe and think, well, there's clearly no issue there, right? It's a wealthy bloc, and there can't be any issues there. But while food security remains an issue for many, about 20% of the food produced in Europe today is wasted. And when you look at that, and then you compound that with the fact that Europe has the second highest proportion of overweight or obese people behind America, it's the opposite side of the same coin, if you see what I mean. It's that triple burden of obesity and malnutrition. And it's within this context that the European Union, the Commission, published its Farm to Fork strategy, which is part of its wider Green Deal priority. It recognises that there's an issue in Europe, and its aim really is to build a fairer, a healthier, a more environmentally friendly food system. And the strategy really is set to accelerate the transition to sustainable food systems in Europe, and to help Europe achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And the focus is around reducing food poverty, promoting good health and well-being, and fighting climate change. So it's trying to bring all those elements together. And since we were founded 40 years ago, Herbalife Nutrition has always championed everyone's right to access good, balanced nutrition as part of that healthy lifestyle we've talked about earlier. So we do support that farm to fork strategy, as it facilitates this shift towards more sustainable diets for its citizens across Europe. A big part of that, and I touched on it a little earlier, is this shift towards plant-based diets. Europeans are starting to make more sustainably conscious and health-driven food decisions. And plant-based diets are becoming increasingly popular amongst Europeans. And it's ironic, we've been promoting plant-based diets as a company for 40 years. And really only over the last 3 or 4 years is it's been something where other people have recognized the power and the importance of plants and proteins as part of your overall diet. And an area where this farm to fork strategy really parallels with India is its investment in educational programs, such as the FSSI Eat Right initiative, which we're talking about today, particularly in schools, to try and change consumer behavior at an early age and help consumers make right choices for their health and for their well-being. And this education piece, I think, is going to be so important in India and in Europe as we move forward. I think another area where we're going to see parallels is in innovation. How are we going to use new ingredients to create new foods that match consumers' demands, whilst making sure those choices that we're trying to create are healthy? And this is something very important on our agenda as a company. And we're always looking for new ways to enhance the environment for innovation through partnerships and collaborations. And we do that around the world. The EU Farm to Fork strategy, a little bit like the FSSAI Eat Right initiative, really have the potential to be pivotal in the long-term sustainability of the food supply and the health and well-being of the generations of both Europe and India. We're certainly committed to supporting both, and we feel that these programs really are going to be game changers as we look back in 5 years, 10 years, to see those turning points for both Europe and for India.
Absolutely. As you rightly mentioned, I mean, the game changer would be to talk more and more about these issues so that they have a huge impact on people who listen and then thereby implement them in their lives. Over the last 2 years, we saw changes, transitions, adaptations, challenges, and many more new features, both professionally and personally for all of us because of the COVID pandemic, the SARS-CoV-2. Can you tell us how it impacted your life and nutrition at large?
Yeah, it's amazing to think it's been 2 years since we first heard the phrase COVID-19 or coronavirus, and I recognize it's been a terrible time for so many people around the world, and my thoughts are with them. And I've been very lucky. My family and I have remained healthy throughout, and we thank the Lord for that. But I think for me, I look at anything like this, any kind of change or challenge, as an opportunity to grow, as an opportunity to experience new things. And yes, I could look at the things that I've missed. I've certainly missed travel. I've certainly missed coming to India. I love coming to India and seeing the people there, enjoying the culture in India and traveling around the world. And I've really missed that. My whole career has been based around meeting people, talking to people, and that piece has certainly gone. But if you look on the flip side of that, I have been able to spend and been very blessed to spend much more time with my own family, and that's been a time which I've really cherished and treasured, because I have a very young family, and I've got to see my son grow over the last couple of years, which maybe I wouldn't have seen some of those moments along the way that have been so precious. If you look at my nutrition, my lifestyle, I've always led a relatively healthy lifestyle, but it's very difficult sometimes. And we've talked today a little bit about accessibility to good nutrition, education. And I've used this time again, how can I learn? How can I look at what I've done previously and maybe learn from that? And nutrition is one part of that. I've always had my shake and my tea and my aloe in the morning, but now I'm able to make better choices for lunchtime, when maybe I would be at an airport, I would be on the road somewhere. So I've been able to build a lot more good nutrition choices into my lifestyle. But if you look broader than that, for me, one of the biggest learnings going forward is the way in which me as an individual, I guess you as an individual as well, Nidhi, and others, and companies, our associates, our distributors, the way almost overnight we shifted from a real world, an in-person world, to a virtual world. And that was great. That was interesting. It was exciting. It was challenging. It was new. And we learned so much along the way in terms of how we would engage with people, how we would engage with our business, with all aspects of our life in a virtual world. Now, as we're coming out of that, it would seem a shame to me to suddenly go back to the way we were, right? Just forget everything we've learned and return to the way we were. So I think for me, the exciting part about the next chapter will be, how do we bring together all the best bits that we had in the virtual world, that we've learned about, that we've discovered. The fact we're having this conversation today on Zoom, we wouldn't really have thought about that 2 years ago. So how can we bring all those good bits together, but also blend in all the fabulous bits about that that in-person connection, that being next to somebody, that kind of conversation, that face-to-face contact. So I think that will be really the exciting part as we look forward into 22 and beyond. How do we blend those two elements to really get the best bit of everything? And for me, I'm excited to see how that looks as we go forward. So yeah, it's been challenging, it's been exciting, it's been eye-opening in many ways. I don't think that's going to change. I think it's going to be challenging, exciting, and eye-opening going forward, but in a different way.
As you said, an amalgamation perhaps of both the virtual and the physical, and then see what all we've learned from the pandemic. Absolutely. There is global demand for better nutrition now. You would agree. What is the new vision statement that you plan to come up with at Herbalife?
For Herbalife, for 40 years, our vision and our statement has always been the same, to bring the very best nutrition to communities around the world through our passionate, supportive, energetic distributors and associates. That isn't going to change, hasn't changed in 40 years. And to be honest, I think it's more relevant, more needed now than it's ever been. I think what we're going to see as we look to the future is how do we evolve that to make it better? A little bit like the online virtual evolution. I think nutrition is going to evolve, the delivery of nutrition is going to evolve. I think we're going to see a lot more personalization. We're already seeing that now. And one of the benefits, I think, of our company and our distributors is they can personalize approaches for their customers that maybe you don't get if you go into a retail store and buy a product from the shelf. But I think what we're seeing in the research around the world is we're going to get down to personalized product ingredients, personalized exercises, even down to a genetic level. They're already looking at research that says, me as an individual, I'm a 50-something-year-old male. I'm not the same as another 50-something-year-old male. So what are we looking genetically? So I think we're going to get down to that level of personalization. I think education is going to be important. And I know that, we've talked about this program from Eat Right Initiative. Education and how we deliver that education is going to change. People aren't coming to classrooms anymore. People aren't really necessarily going to come to Zoom calls or to pre-arranged times when they have to learn. People want to learn on their terms. So whether that's providing bite-sized education through their mobile phone, whether that's combining in-person, virtual, experiential learning, all these different elements I think are going to come together. I think we're going to see a continued shift by consumers towards a much broader understanding of wellness and what it means for them. Whether that's clean labels, whether that's their life choices around exercise, whether that's products for specific needs that they have. All these different elements I think are really important. And I think people are going to start to build that holistic approach to their lifestyles going forward. Now, we've touched on mobile phones, but I think wearables, Apple Watches, Fitbits, all these things, I think are just the start of what we're going to see when it comes to delivering that personalized approach to wellness and to good nutrition. And I touched on it earlier, and I think it's going to become much, much more important. Sustainability. People are much, much more aware of the impact their choices are having on the environment and the planet that they're leaving behind for their children, for their grandchildren. So I think we're going to see a shift away from meat towards plant-based diets. I think that companies are going to have to be innovative. They're going to have to find new ways to deliver these products, great tasting products, in a way that people want to consume them. So it's, again, really interesting future ahead. But in terms of our vision, our mission, it stays the same. Give consumers the best possible nutrition for them. And that isn't going to change.
Well, and on that pragmatic note, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We are truly overwhelmed with your presence and you sharing your pearls of wisdom amongst all our viewers. Our deepest and warmest gratitude goes out to Eat Right India initiative by FSSAI, which is supported by Herbalife Nutrition and is bringing a huge awareness in the society to make a healthier, happier India and a happier globe. A special shout out to Herbalife Nutrition once again for their sustainable, socially responsible, and ethical practices. And a special shout out also to our broadcasting partners, the Mitro app, Daily Hunt, One India, and the Josh app for helping us reach millions of citizens. And on that note, many thanks for watching. Namaskar. Namaste, I'm Nidhi Kumar, your host for today's session, and we're extremely excited to bring to you the Eat Right India initiative of FSSAI and supported by Herbalife Nutrition. Also acknowledging our broadcasting partners, the Josh app, the Mitro app, Daily Hunt, and One India. And together we'd like to extend a very fervent welcome to all the viewers who are watching this program titled Nutrition for All, Action Through Stronger Partnerships and Government Policies. Well, India's association with food has been long and strong. But in India, 47 million people are stunted and 196 million people suffer from chronic hunger and malnutrition. And the ability of governments to engage all food system actors to deliberate over current values and practices, and a capacity to monitor and evaluate, learn, respond towards the expanded ambit of health must continue. This requires great policymakers, vision, strong political commitment across center and states for India to undertake this collective journey. Today, we take time to address multiple dimensions and various forms of malnutrition, which require an integrated policy, coherent action, and total transformation of the country's food system. We're very privileged to have with us Professor Srinath Reddy, President of the Public Health Foundation of India and member of the Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition. Professor Reddy is a member of the Global Panel on Food Systems for Nutrition. He's co-chaired the Health Ministry's Steering Committee on Health-Related Efforts and on air pollution as well. And we're also very happy to be joined by Dr. C.S. Pandav, who has worked on iodine deficiency disorders since 1983. He's also known as the Iodine Man of India and has recently been decorated with the highest honor, Padma Shri. He's an advisory board member, reviewer for various reputed journals, and he has also been working for women and child development in the Indian Council of Medical Research, Food Safety and Standards Benchmarks, FSSAI. We're also very happy to have with us former Executive Director of the Coalition for Food and Nutrition, Dr. Sujit Ranjan, who's been associated with this work for over 2 decades and has experience in implementation and management of sustainable development projects. He's got vast experience in design, implementation, and management, and has worked on several programs encompassing integration of social empowerment, economic development, and challenging geographies in the food sector. So I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. And poor diets pose a greater risk to health than any other combination. And we need to speedily strengthen our health systems, therefore. So I will begin by asking Dr. Reddy about the nutritional landscape of India and your views about it, sir.
I believe that we still have several nutrition challenges. While we have substantially achieved a greater increase in food production and therefore have the ability to address our nutritional challenges, nevertheless, we still see several phases of malnutrition in this country. We see what we can call as undernutrition, which is manifested as underweight, stunting, or wasting, particularly in children. We see overweight and obesity also rising in this country, which with its attendant problems of several diseases like diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. And we also have a third category, of micronutrient deficiencies in which essential nutrients required in small amounts by the body are still not available and produce what's called the hidden hunger. So this particular problem is likely to be a cause of significant adverse impact on children as well as in women, and in terms of producing anemia and a number of other nutritional deficiency disorders in children with all the manifestations that I have described of stunting, wasting, and underweight. But also the overweight and obesity can also be in multiple forms. You can have general obesity, which is where the overall fat content of the body increases. You can have abdominal obesity or visceral adiposity, where there is a greater fat accumulation in the abdomen, even if the person doesn't look very obese. And there are people who may not look overweight or obese, but still, if their lean muscle mass is low, and if they have a lot of body fat, then that can be actually also called metabolic obesity, and that's mostly concentrated around the abdominal organs. And that also can produce a lot of inflammation in the body, produce diabetes, produce heart disease, and can lead to cancers and other forms of disease as well. So given these three forms of malnutrition, we do need to take urgent steps to try and correct these, both in order to produce people's health, but also to ensure that our march towards economic growth is not impaired by the inability of people to enjoy good health because of poor nutrition.
Dr. Panda, firstly, I'd like to congratulate you on the Padma Shri, and I want to ask you to make people aware on your views on universal salt iodization and how important that is.
Before I answer your question, Didi, Srinath, and Sujit, my esteemed colleagues, I want to express my gratitude to the Corona warriors. Last 2 years, we have been all caught up by Corona, COVID-19. Different people have a different interpretation of COVID-19, but this is not the forum to address that. So I want to express my gratitude to physicians, to the surgeons, to the nurses, to the pharmacists, to the ward boys, to the drivers, to the ambulance, to the security guards. I want to express my gratitude. I think during this pandemic, almost 1,500 doctors have died, almost 1,500 and more. So I want to express my condolences to their families. I think the government has a scheme to compensate for them. I don't know the details. But Srinath, as a social responsible person, we also need to contribute something from our side. Srinath, you might remember a poem, Into the Valley of Death, wrote the 600. I think it was Lord Tennyson.
Yes, Charge of the Light Brigade.
Charge of the Light Brigade. I knew that.
Alfred Lord Tennyson, yes.
Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Alfred Lord Tennyson. So these people knew that they are going to the valley of death, and in spite of that, they sacrificed. I am particularly little sentimental. Srinath sir, my teacher, mentor, Dr. Jain Pandey, also we lost him during this pandemic. Srinath, he taught us medicine, whatever medicine I know. Srinath was a postgraduate student. I was an intern that time. In Unit 2 of Dr. Guleria was the head of the unit. So I want to play a special condolence to Dr. Jain Pandey and his family. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Guru Namah. It was a very moving moment in my life when I met Mrs. Pandey at Rashtrapati Bhavan. My number was 76 and 77 was Dr. Pandey. So it was a very moving moment to Srinath to meet Madam and his son. It was a very moving moment. I wish he was not there in physical form, but he was very much there. So talking about universal salt iodization, my childhood friend Srinath mentioned about partnership to end hidden hunger. Can you see this?
Yes, yes.
I organized this conference way back in 1995 on 4th, 9th, 9th April 1995. The partnership to hidden hunger, even IDD is hidden. Can you see IDD?
Yes.
In the hidden, the IDD is also hidden. IDD is also hidden. So I'm passionate about universal salt iodization. With what I mean by universal standardization, that is for everybody, for human beings and for animals as well. In India, we are only focused on human beings, but not on animals. I've written a book also that ITD is also present in animals as well. That book has been published by Oxford University Press. The reason I'm passionate about universal standardization, adequately iodized salt, is because in the field of nutrition, as in politics, the task is to do what is possible without forgetting to do what is necessary. The single most important cause of mental retardation in the world is iodine deficiency, and it is totally preventable. That's how I got engaged into this particular thing. Nidhi, I wanted to become a neurosurgeon. And I did my first house job in neurosurgery and second in anesthesiology. Then Dr. Ramalik Swami was my director of AIMS. He called me to his office. He said, Chandrakant, you want to become a neurosurgeon and earn money? Go to public health. That's how I went to public health. And again, by accident, I took IDD as my area of career commitment. There are two kinds of teachers we meet in life. Those who are mentors and those who are tormentors. I was lucky to meet mentors in my life. So that's why I went for IDD. So I'm passionate because it's totally preventable and the cost per person is less than 10 paise per person per year. That's why I'm passionate about iodine deficiency disorders. By God's grace, I had a chance to work not only in India, not only in Southeast Asia, but also globally. I've been to China 12 times, and I shaped the country's health policy in China as well. So I'm excited. I'm grateful to my teachers who guided me through this thing. I remember Srinath and Sunanda, his wife, were sitting in the cafeteria. And my first paper, endemic goiter in Delhi, my English was poor. Srinath was very good. And Sunanda was very good. So my first paper was edited in the cafeteria of AIMS. And it was published in Indian Journal of Medical Research. So thank you very much, Srinath and Sunanda, for helping me to write my first publication. When I went for MD examination, I already was published in a peer-reviewed journal. So the examiner didn't ask me any questions. He said, "Tumne paper publish kiya, aapse kya puchenge bhai?" So that's how I passed my MD. Thank you.
Dr. Ranjan, if I can ask you to please elaborate on the nutritional landscape of India and the kind of work that you've been doing. What do you feel are, the constraints?
Yeah, thank you very much, Dee. And after listening from Dr. Reddy, Dr. Pandav, and I got an opportunity to work with both of them and very closely with both of them and learned that malnutrition is the worst form of non-communicable disease, a critical risk factor for chronic disease later in the life, and therefore a huge global healthcare burden. In India, as we all know, it has taken a magnitude of a silent emergency. And at the same time, India has the highest level of public investment in food and nutrition security in the world through its public funded programs. However, the widespread wide prevalence of anemia and macronutrients deficiencies among the children and women remains cause of concern for each one of us. And access of service and supplies, gender equity, healthcare, like the healthy feeding behavior, are the key for the critical factors for sustainable food and nutrition security. And if you see the recent data of the NFHS, and we have seen the data for the National Family Health Survey, that reveals that India should more than ever focus on nutrition. Especially the acute malnutrition is an important public health concern, as it associated with significant short and long-term morbidity and mortality, and this disproportionately affect the population in India. And the children with severe acute malnutrition require immediate attention, along with the proper nutrients rehabilitation. So it's very important. Like we understand, we should understand, and though I can say we have understood the binding constraint in the implementation of nutrition program in the country, like after the NFHS 4 and now the NFHS 5, we try to learn like what are the key binding constraints in the implementation of nutrition program in the country. And the gaps are like the human resource, particularly in the supervisory level, the procurement of the devices like the growth monitoring and the devices, the smartphones, and also the attention of the data, how the data is going to be, the data culture can be promoted, data collected through the ICDS. And the most important is the fund utilization. Recently, you have seen like how the very low rate of fund utilization. I think these are the important component where we have to put our best effort so that we can utilize the resources in a more appropriate and better manner. And we can address this issue in a very, very collaborative and very committed manner. And you are talking about very important question from Dr. Pando about the iodine deficiency and all. So we know like this NFHS 5 data has clearly mentioned about the micronutrient deficiency in the country. And the solution also, like the food fortification, is one of the simplest and the most sustainable public health strategies to address the challenge of micronutrient deficiency, not only in a cost-effective or scientific or the proven, rather globally recognized complementary approach. And it helps to easily reach a wider vulnerable population through existing food delivery system. And whether it's a public distribution system, take-home ration through ICDS, or midday meal from education department. So there are channels where we can reach out to the population and we can address the hidden hunger and micronutrient deficiency in a more planned manner.
Dr. Reddy, my question is to you now, taking it from Dr. Sujit, what he suggested. How do you look at global partnerships of governments, since you are heading the Public Health Foundation of India? How do you look at global benchmarks in collaboration on policies? What is the status so far, if we compare India with, say, the rest of the world, sir?
Well, different countries have different policies related to how much they support local agriculture, food production, marketing, export, and even different standards of nutrient composition and safety. So we ought to try and get the countries aligned on common nutrition goals for the world. There is no point in having some countries either consuming in excess, whereas other countries are having much greater shortage of essential foods. We must also recognize that when we talk about nutrition security rather than just food security, we are talking about dietary diversity. We are talking about crop diversity. And therefore, the idea of actually producing different varieties of staples, non-staples, fruits and vegetables in adequate quantities for global consumption, but also pricing them in an affordable manner is going to be very, very important. While much of this is done at the national level, there are a large number of transnational factors affecting what is produced in one country being exported to another country, often not being available in the country where it is produced because of trade reasons. At the same time, in the opposite direction, there is also a dumping of unhealthy food products in some of the other countries. And we have seen that often trade laws are invoked in order to dump such unhealthy products. And because when countries try and take action, then they say trade agreements and free trade will be affected. So we ought to get all the countries aligned on common nutrition goals and then say, okay, for this, these are the kind of agricultural policies that are required. These are the kind of trade policies that are required. And we ought to ensure that everyone, anywhere in the world, has access to appropriate diets across the entire life course as needed. And there, food waste is another major problem. A very large proportion of food that is produced is wasted in a number of ways, both in terms of immediate post-production losses, poor storage, poor transport, of being attacked by pests and rodents and so on, but also a huge amount of wastage at the table. So there is a lot to be done in all of these areas, which requires not only an individual level action or a national action, but also global action. So this becomes an important element where we ought to get a global consensus. Lastly, one of the most important lessons for us is that the food and agricultural systems have a bidirectional relationship with climate change. We are living in a world where the way we produce our food and food products, especially captive bred animals in large factory farms for meat, which results in deforestation, large amount of methane gas emission, that undermines the climate. At the same time, climate change, because of a variety of reasons, because of heat stress and water stress, reduces the amount of production of staples as well as non-staples and affects their nutrient quality. For every 1 degree rise in centigrade rise in temperature, South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa will suffer a 10% loss in the production of staples. At the same time, the iron, protein, and zinc content of staples will decrease with increasing heat and increasing carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So if we have to try and ensure that there is no climate change and global warming as an accelerator of deterioration of both the quantity and quality of the food that's produced across the world, that requires global cooperation. So both in terms of production dynamics, in terms of ensuring that the trade is not likely to inflict a lot of damage on countries, and also to make sure that a diversity of diet is available to everybody to provide the required nutrients in the right amounts in an affordable manner, you require international cooperation.
Absolutely, sir. And if you could also elucidate what Public Health Foundation is doing for this kind of cooperation.
Well, firstly, we are doing a fair amount in terms of analyzing the nutrition policies and availability of different types of essential nutrients in the country. And we are also trying to provide appropriate nutrition messages to the people. So nutrition literacy is an important element. But one of the important elements is also try and influence policy through evidence. For example, when we talk about climate change and agriculture, how do we actually influence the movement towards climate smart agriculture, climate resilient agriculture? Secondly, when we talk about dietary diversity, how are we talking about reducing our dependence on staples, increasing the amount of intake of millets and pulses? So these are some of the things that we need to talk about, but particularly on fruits and vegetables, for example, which are very important for providing the right kind of nutrients, a number of important phytochemicals that are there in the fruit. So all of these are essentially areas where we ought to increase the nutritional literacy among people, but also ensure that the policies are steered towards these kind of what we can call climate sensitive, nutrition sensitive agriculture and food production policies. And that is where informed advocacy plays a role.
So, Dr. Pandav, I'd like to ask you now, Dr. Srinath Reddy mentioned policies. What do you feel about policies on salt? And what do you think about the iron deficiency disorders that are prevalent?
Deaf mutism is one of the manifestations of iodine deficiency, deaf mutism. Srinath, if I may add, you talk about food security and nutrition security, but at the bottom of the pyramid is agricultural security. Unless we have agricultural security, we can't talk of food security. Unless we have food security, you can't talk of nutrition security. So this must be reflected in the various departments, various ministries we have. We have Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock, Animal Husbandry. We have Ministry of Women and Child Development. We have Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. We have Ministry of Civil Supplies and Cooperation. I think there has to be Agriculture, Food and Nutrition Ministry. That's what I personally very strongly feel about it. Because unless we bring under this under one umbrella, it will be difficult to challenge. This requires a new thinking. And one important challenges we have in India is interministerial coordination. Easily said than done, easily said than done. Very difficult. Very, very difficult to bring various ministers together. Each one lives in its own silos. And that's the tragedy. I strongly recommend Srinath and Sujit that there has to be agriculture, food, and nutrition ministry under one umbrella. Now, with respect to policy of IDD, I was very lucky in that way. It was way back in 1983. I presented our result to Mrs. Indira Gandhi at Indian Council of Medical Research. At that point in time, I also showed her a film, Will the Salt Reach Padrona? Incidentally, Nidhi, this film got a President's Gold Medal as a documentary. And she took an instantaneous decision. She asked the doctors there, what should I do? I said, Madam, go for salt ionization. So 1984 was a turning point in the history. So we had political commitment. That's necessary, but not sufficient. Unless there is administrative infrastructure to translate that political commitment to action, it's not useful. Then you have scientific leadership. Scientific leadership is very vital, and All India Institute of Medical Sciences played a very, very important role, right from Dr. Ramalingam, Dr. Pandav, in providing scientific leadership, not only to India, but globally. And fourth is the financial support. So there are four components to this activity: political commitment, scientific leadership, adequate infrastructure to translate that into action, and fourth is the financial. Unless you have these four things, it will be difficult for any program to move forward. There was an article written by Professor Samuel Paul. He was a professor of management at the Indian Institute of Management at Ahmedabad. And he wrote an article in Economic and Political Weekly about translating policy into action. And he wrote an article, and he quotes me very extensively in that article. So these are the four components. Policy is necessary but not sufficient. You got to have political commitment. You got to have scientific leadership. You got to have adequate administrative infrastructure. You got to have financial commitment.
Dr. Sujit, I'd like to ask you now if you could elaborate on policies related to women and children, and how we could probably better their immunity through fibers and last mile nutrition in India. What are your thoughts?
So, I think this is a very important question today and important for all of us. I got an opportunity to part of this call to action under the leadership of Professor M.S. Swaminathan and most of the civil society organizations and the eminent nutrition specialists in the country were part of that. So that was the wonderful opportunity to learn from the various what are the good things are happening in different parts of the country and how we can come together with the call to action to move forward in a very concrete, collaborated, and effective manner to achieve nutritional security in the country. And that time was 2012 to 2012 onward. And we got and then the National Nutrition Mission, that's the Poshan Abhiyan, was launched in the year 2010, and it's a kind of whatever we were thinking, all of us, whatever we are aiming for to take the nutrition in a mission mode. So that was the Poshan Abhiyan provided a kind of response to all the questions which we are having in our mind. But after that, in the year 2020, again, we came together. And again, we came together for the commitment to action. Commitment to action, the call to action was there. They brought Poshan Abhiyan. The commitment to action was again the focused engagement of a broad range of stakeholders working on nutrition in India, and who have joined force to ensure the strong focus of maintain nutrition during even the COVID pandemic. Yeah, and a couple of important, like you mentioned, mother and child. So the key action, key areas for the urgent action was the 6. Number 1, sustained leadership for food and nutrition security. And the sustained leadership, if I'm saying, from from national to the our panchayat level, how the sustained leadership can be ensured. And the second was to ensure uninterrupted universal and the high quality coverage of selected evidence informed essential nutrition interventions down the line. And the third was to ensure adequate financing to deliver at a scale the essential nutrition intervention with active attention to the equity was very important. The fourth was the accelerate efforts during the crisis to address both nutrition sensitive as well as nutrition specific intervention. केवल पोषाहार और जो डायरेक्टली उनसे जुड़े हुए हैं उसको न कर सोशल एस्पेक्ट को भी कैसे हम देखें, whether it's a child early marriage or the early pregnancy, status of women in the society, how the underlying and the root causes of malnutrition. Then apart from that, the fifth one was retain nutrition as a development indicator and to continue with the investment in the data system for a periodic data-driven updates. And the sixth was leverage the COVID-19 scenario to emphasize a collective multi-sectoral approach. So that has again given an opportunity, like to all 164 organizations and the people come together, and the ministries like Ministry of Women and Child Development, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Ministry of Public Distribution, Civil Supplies. And now we can see how the things are going down the line and how that is part of the like the key agenda of most of the development organizations. So by this way, we tried to address the nutrition security. Here, I would also like to add, so far as the policy and its implementation is concerned, we also decided and we learned that the civil society organization, including self-help groups, can play a very active role in supporting solution at local level, such as promotion of Nutri-Garden, such as to generate the self-reliant population, support the capacity building efforts down the line, how the क्षमता निर्माण को कैसे हम पूरा ensure कर सकते हैं. Then the support the nutrition security, like the technology innovation in agriculture, the data collection, the monitoring mechanism, and the role of panchayat institution. So we also learned that how we can use the best, I think, the strength of all the civil society organization, and a right time to explore public-private partnership opportunity for creating a sustainable public health ecosystem. And also one important thing I would like to add here, like the NFHS 5 data has also given us a clear direction, like what are the key asks we are having from the convergence, say for the health, what are the things are needed? If the preventive parts, especially the 1,000 days, how that can be ensured and how that can be utilized as a window opportunity in a more effective manner in coordination with the health and the other line departments. So that was the policy work, and I am very much sure that together we will make a difference in the coming days if this kind of efforts is going on and will continue.
Absolutely. Dr. Reddy, I'd like to ask you here to add on women and child and how government partnerships across pan-India and across the globe could probably contribute to better nutrition for all of them. Since a lot of them are not having enough nutrition, how many people can afford to eat right in India?
We must recognize that nutrition of women and children requires a life course approach. When you're talking about a stunted child, we must recognize that 20% of that stunting happens even before the child is born. Another 20% occurs in the first 6 months of life, and then the rest of it takes place up to 5 years. So you have to take a life course approach right from the girl child. If you have an inadequately nourished girl child who is small for size herself, with a small pelvis, and she is rushed into an early marriage, and she has a small pelvis and the child is going to be small, but more than that, the placenta size will be small. The blood flow will be limited. If her nutrition suffers, she is not going to produce a healthy child. She will not be able to breastfeed the child with adequate amount of milk. All of that will be reflected in that child. And it will impair the nutrition of that child, and it will be no surprise if that child grows out to be wasted or stunted. Equally importantly, there is an intergenerational effect that not many people recognize. Suppose there is a woman who is undernourished and she is carrying a female baby. Not only is the female baby going to be affected, but the ovaries of that female baby that is growing in the uterus, which are carrying the egg cells of that female unborn baby, they'll also be affected by what are called epigenetic changes. So it's not only the yet to be born child that's going to be affected, but the yet to be conceived child later on, the third generation also will be affected, and the health will be affected. So women and child nutrition requires a life course approach where we are focusing at all stages, right from the girl child and adolescent girl who is anemic, ensure that she is not anemic and she is adequately nourished, that not only that we are not rushing in for an early marriage, but ensuring that women during the reproductive period have adequate diet and they're not neglected in their homes. They're not treated as second-rate citizens who only pick up morsels, but they get adequate nutrition. And nutrition during pregnancy is good. And again, it means a diverse diet. And for the child, it means compulsory breastfeeding for the first 6 months, and then timely weaning with complementary foods. And again, a lot of dietary diversity to be built in as the child grows, and enough possibility of both stimulation as well as physical activity. That's also important. Preventing infections is going to be important. Infections in childhood also contribute to stunting because they impair the nutrition. If the child has frequent diarrheal infections, then the nutrition suffers. So there are many steps to be taken at various stages, which actually influence the health of women and children. And that is where we must ensure that our nutrition policies are well directed across those life course interventions, but that it's not merely seen as a temporary measure during one particular period of life or one particular treatment for anemia as a sort of stopgap arrangement. We need to take all the possible measures across the life course.
Sir, so what do you see as big pillars of public health that India should focus on, Dr. Pandav?
Actually, Dr. Reddy has enumerated large number of complex causes for addressing the issue of malnutrition or undernutrition or overnutrition. And he focused on obesity. We seem to be forgetting. It's actually malnutrition means under as well as over.
Yeah.
Dr. Reddy, I just want to share with you, amongst all this environment of despair and disappointing statistics, there is something called positive deviance. In the same environment, we see some children doing very well while others are not doing so well. So we must try to understand the reasons for positive deviance and bring them to scales. That would be my first contribution to what Dr. Srinath said. That is a life cycle approach, it's intergenerational. I get very angry at the human hunger index when they present the human hunger index and rank India to some number. Because undernutrition, it's a global problem. Why do you want to just isolate India and criticize? I don't understand this whole concept of hunger index. I don't understand. Now, the policy people are basically the message. There are multiple actors that are involved. Most important is community empowerment, women's empowerment. Unless the messages trickles down to them, you won't have a sustained change in the society. You won't have a sustained change in the society or the environment. So I would suggest what I learned from Dr. Srinath Reddy over a period of time is political agenda. Unless you get political agenda, nutrition in the political agenda, nothing is going to move. And that has to be monitored by the citizens. The various districts in the country should be ranked according to the constituencies of the elected representatives at the state level or at the national level. And this has to be made public. So we have to make our leaders accountable publicly. That alone will help us to accelerate in addressing the undernutrition and overnutrition problems. India is a democracy, a vibrant democracy, and that has to be practiced besides only casting a vote once in 5 years. We have to ask our elected representatives by evidence-based data, not eminence-based data as they do in COVID-19, evidence-based data as to what have they done for their constituency. So that would be my very strong recommendation and my vision, see that we held elected representatives at the state level and at the national level accountable for undernutrition and overnutrition. Thank you, Nidhi.
Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Sujit Ranjan, your last thoughts on Poshan Abhiyan and how it may help India steer the way for better nutrition.
So, with the help of Poshan Abhiyan, we have recognized, yes, malnutrition is a complex problem. Malnutrition is a very important national. It should be a kind of it should be treated as a silent emergency. And also, like the first, we recognize. Second, we got an opportunity to align. We agree on drivers. We agree on solutions. The third, we are very clear about the act, the policy instruments, invest in effective programs. And the fourth, that's the important pillar, is that to learn how to monitor the program more effectively, how to recalibrate the program so that we can make the corrective measures in our efforts which we are making. So that's the learning we are having. But still, there are lots of I think learning how we can further strengthen. And the new mission Poshan 2, that's the mission Poshan 2, the second phase of Poshan Abhiyan, is trying to bring most of the components which we are lacking, and especially the research part. I must say that the research part is like Dr. Reddy mentioned about the intergenerational malnutrition is an issue. How the linkages between the malnutrition and family planning can be established in the country, how the low birth weight baby can be addressed in by this way, and how we can understand the importance of the private sectors, how the private sectors can play a vital role in food fortification, given in the presence of private food industries in our country and dependency on people on private food processors rather than the public distribution system, how they given the mandate from the government for the staple food fortification, involvement of private industries, and 6 important pillars, I can say, whether it's like the capacity of the functionaries from top to bottom, especially the frontline workers, the convergence of the various institution departments at every level, then how we can change the behavior, like through by going through the formative research, like what can work well in that particular area. And also we realized that the data, how we can cast, like the data can be analyzed in a more effective manner. So I'm confident that by this way, if you are moving in this direction, it's a well thought, it's a well designed program, but it's need proper convergence, proper collaboration, and that has to be ensured not only by the government, rather the civil society organizations, those who are playing an important role. They have to play a very active and role here to bring all the players together. So I'm hopeful in the coming days, if you are moving in this direction, we can bring a change, and I'm confident that we can make a difference.
Absolutely. Dr. Reddy, your last thoughts on transformation of the country's food system and engaging more policy?
Well, we ought to really put in our best effort, starting from recognizing where we want to reach. If we want to reach nutrition security through dietary diversity, which provides calorically adequate, that means sufficient amount of energy, but in terms of nutrient composition, well-balanced diets, which are affordable to everybody, age and activity appropriate in terms of the requirement for every person at each stage of the life course, then we ought to frame our agriculture, food and nutrition policies, as Dr. Pandal says, in synchrony with those objectives. We cannot do it piecemeal. So it has to be a plan to ensure that we produce the kind of crops in terms of crop diversity that will give us the dietary diversity and ensure that it is available to everybody at affordable prices. At the same time, enhance nutrition literacy among people so that they also make the right choices, curb industry practices which are likely to lead them on the wrong path to consume harmful food products, or ensure that aggressive marketing of unhealthy food practices is also not permitted. So a combination of incentives and disincentives to the industry is also required, where you encourage them to make healthier products available, but discourage them from making unhealthy products or aggressively marketing them. So all of these are elements of a holistic nutrition policy that we must implement.
Absolutely. And on that very pragmatic note, I'd like to thank all three of you for joining us today. And friends, there is an urgent need to revisit the National Nutrition Strategy and global partnerships and move quickly towards achieving the goals of eradicating hunger and preventing malnutrition in all its forms in the globe. Our deepest and warmest gratitude goes out to Eat Right India initiative by FSSAI, which is bringing a huge awareness in society to transform the nutritional landscape of India. And also my sincere thanks to Herbalife Nutrition for supporting us in this program. Thank you, Herbalife Nutrition. A special shout out to you and to our broadcasting partners, the Josh app, Daily Hunt, One India, and Mitro, for helping us reach millions of citizens. On that note, many thanks for watching. Namaskar.